Campus Crusade for Christ.
Mhm.
What is that about?
Well, let's see if I can remember exactly, because I used to have to get up at the weekly meeting and say this. Campus Crusade for Christ is an interdenominational Christian organization founded in 1951 by Bill and Vonette Bright.
Wow.
Our philosophy is threefold: to win, build, and send. Win students to Christ, build them up in their faith, and send them out to continue the win, build, send process.
How's that working out for you?
Hey, it worked pretty well for a while, man.
Yeah. Well, you were pretty knowledgeable, right? Like you would be able to talk to people and convert people. I mean, presumably that doesn't go away. Like you've still got the knowledge, right?
Yeah.
You've still got it inside of you.
That the evangelical Christian part of my brain will never go away.
Yeah.
Is always there, judging the deconstructed Los Angeles YouTuber. You know, I think so. I whenever I see somebody talk about me, and I try not to do that very often.
Mhm.
Like I know, just being on your podcast and talking about it, like we get, you know this game very well. You give you give the material, you provide the material for all the Christian reaction channels.
Oh, sure.
This is what
yeah.
they feed off of, right? This is what they want. If we're talking about this, they want to talk about us talking about it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I'm listening to myself say things and I'm like, oh, well, that's what they're going to say about this.
Yeah.
You know, and I try not to calculate that too much and think about, you can drive yourself crazy, like trying to like orchestrate all your words.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's something you're always aware of as a
Yeah.
public figure. Was most of the stuff that you were doing, like, was it biblical? Was it arguments for God's existence? Was it like, what kind of approach were you taking? What's your like expertise when it comes to evangelism?
So with Campus Crusade for Christ, we would share something called the 4 spiritual laws.
Mm.
And it was a little booklet, essentially, that Bill Bright, the founder of Campus Crusade, had put together. And it was essentially a gospel tract. You know, God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life. All people have sinned. And it's the gospel, right?
Yeah.
And 4 laws, 4 spiritual laws. It was very like 1950s Christianity, you know. But it was very effective because what it did is you had the ability, and of course I wouldn't like always break out the booklet. I would just, you know, maybe do it in the context of a conversation. But, you know, you might go out on, it sounds crazy when you think about it, but like we would go down to spring break at like Panama City Beach, and you got all these kids just partying on the beach. And we were like, well, we're going to go out on the beach and we're going to start spiritual conversations with people. And we're going to plant seeds in the least, and in the best case scenario, we're going to bring someone to a point of decision. That's what you want to do, you know, bring them to that point of decision, right? So a great question is, you know, if you were to die tonight, how certain are you that you would go to heaven, right? I mean, that's a great.
It's heavy.
It's heavy, and usually if like you're in the middle of partying in Panama City Beach and you're like drunk and you're so many students are sort of, you know, day 3, day 4 at spring break, and they've just been pumping themselves full of alcohol, and they're literally, some of them are still having a ball, but some of them are like actively realizing that there's no fulfillment in the excesses, right? And they're like, it's like the perfect time to approach them.
Man, it's quite an existential moment, really.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen a lot of interviews with drunk people on the streets, and it can go one of 2 ways. There are like the funny ones when people are vulnerable in the sense that they might say something a bit stupid or whatever, and it makes for a funny viral moment. But also, the Christian outreach. I know people were doing that at my university too, where they used to sort of stand outside the nightclubs, and they weren't actually preaching or evangelizing. They would just hand out like water and biscuits and things. And I suppose it was like it's a Christian route, but
yes.
it is. I mean, all of the vices sort of come out in a nightclub.
Yeah.
In the party atmosphere, everything about your inhibitions, and I feel like that is probably the place where Christ enters so many people. Like when people tell their stories about coming to Christianity, it's often that kind of situation, but writ large across their life. It's like I was in the dumps, I had nowhere to turn, and at the end of a night at the club, you're sort of in a sort of microcosm of a moment like that for the day. You know, you're tired, the lights have come on, and everything is suddenly really ugly. When I was in Las Vegas, I remember I've been there once, and I I showed up at night, and I thought, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. It was
Right.
glamorous, it was glittering, it was beautiful. And then the morning I woke up relatively early because I was on UK time, and the whole thing was like baked in sunlight, and suddenly it all looked really silly. It looked silly
Yeah.
and plastic. And my friend said it was a bit like at the end of a nightclub where the lights come on and you realize everything's actually been ugly the whole time, and you just sort of see it. And he's like, that's kind of what Jesus does. You know? He just like turns the light on and shows you that everything was ugly all along. Because I mean, Vegas is one of the most demonic places I've ever been to in my life. Even had, right. So I was there with
there's an emptiness there for sure.
I was there with the guy with there's a show called the Iced Coffee Hour, which I was on, and one of the hosts of that, he was sort of driving me down LA, and we went past what's the pyramid one called? You know, the one that's like Egypt. I forget what the place is actually called.
But I don't know the name of it.
It's got this huge pyramid that shoots this massive beam of light up into the sky, right? And he said, oh, that's really interesting actually, because, you know, Las Vegas often gets these like swarms of locusts. I was like, really? They get swarms of locusts? He was like, yeah. And you know, the crazy thing is, because this pyramid shoots up that massive beam of light, it's amazing. When it happens, they all like swarm onto it.
It's like a tornado.
And start going crazy. And I was like, so you're telling me that swarms of locusts descend on Egypt in Sin City?
Yeah.
It was all getting a little bit biblical.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that is the perfect place to walk up to somebody and be like, do you think there's something more?
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I think that one of the misconceptions about someone who, like me, was a person of faith, of Christian faith, and is no longer a person of Christian faith, or, you know, I've got some faith in things, but not really religious faith, is that somehow the two alternatives are that life of excess and selfishness and like pleasure, or religious faith in Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can throw people off a lot of times when I'm like, oh, I recognize you know, I don't see it as necessarily like, well, one is right and one is wrong, but it's just like, yeah, clearly like a human that is simply focusing on pleasures like that ultimately end up just being, they become empty pretty quickly. Like that's just a universal truth. That's not, like, you as a Christian don't have a universal hold on that truth. That's not just because it was mentioned in the Bible doesn't mean that that's the only place that truth shows up. Like it's a human experience, right? So now, as someone who doesn't really know what I think about God, I still recognize like the emptiness of a place like Las Vegas. But I'm also like, you know what? Maybe every once in a while I want to go experience some excess pleasures.
Yeah. Oh, it was fun.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not judge myself or judge others for it at the same time.
Yeah.
Knowing that if I take the perspective into that, oh, I recognize the emptiness of this. You know, eating at a buffet. I mean, how many times can you eat at a buffet, right?
Yeah.
Before you're like, okay, get me out of the buffets. But I feel like, again, this is kind of the perspective that I think about the way that I thought about those students when I was there with the truth in my hand.
Mm.
You know, I was like, there's two paths here. There's the path that you're on, which is just self-sabotage, or there's Jesus. Never considering that, well, maybe there's a few more ways to think about these things.
Do you think there's pride in there? I mean, one of the worst sins a Christian can commit is the sin of pride. And I think they're constantly sort of battling against it, especially when you're in a position, I mean, let alone some of the people I talk to who have public platforms, constantly putting themselves in front of a microphone and answering people's questions and being constantly praised. It must be really difficult to not get prideful when it starts working. But even in an outreach situation like this, is there an element where it's sort of like, not like I'm better than these people, but like, look at me doing this good thing, walking into the depths of hell and harrowing it and getting everyone, you know, back to Christ?
Yes. I mean, I think that there's an element of sort of taking pride in the work that you're doing for God, even though you can easily give God the credit, be like, the Spirit was working through me. Because if you know the code of humility, and you know how to talk about these things, but secretly you're thinking about how you're doing in relation to other Christians, and you're thinking about how they're doing in relation to you. Yeah. You can't, it's human nature. You're gonna do that. But I think there's another type of pride that I think back on those times I remember a specific instance, and this is actually after I was no longer on staff with Campus Crusade, but I was still very active in the church, and I was leading a Bible study.
Mm-hmm.
And we had become friends with this couple that were Catholic, and in my estimation, Catholics weren't Christians. I mean, I was that type of evangelical.
Whoa,
yeah.
really?
I was like, well, maybe there's some that actually have a relationship with Jesus,
Idolaters,
but
worshiping Mary.
but they believe,
Yeah.
they believe that it's works and faith. It's not just faith alone,
Sure.
and so they don't have the grace thing figured out. At the very least, I need to introduce them to the real truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew they were going to be there. And so I was like, well, I'm going to do a Bible study. I'm going to go from Galatians, right? Because Galatians talks about that, basically how it's about faith and and not about works. And it was one of those things that in retrospect, I was thinking about them, and everyone else in the Bible study, the other regulars, knew that I was kind of preaching to them from this perspective. And I think back on that, and I'm like, I brought a lot of spiritual pride to that situation because I thought I had the correct perspective and just assumed they don't agree with me about this, and they're definitely wrong. I'm bringing them in to give them the truth. When you think that you've got the truth, and it's a truth that impacts everyone, it applies to everyone, it's really difficult to not take pride in that and to begin to see yourself as better. I mean, I'm not saying that all Christians think that they're better than other people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying for me,
for your experience,
I remember lying there when I was in college and thinking how grateful I was that I basically believed the right thing about everything.
Yeah, well, I often parody Christian denominations with that exact thought. It's like,
Right.
what are the odds? How lucky you are.
And with no irony at all.
Yeah.
Of course, I was, a 20-year-old kid, but I was lying there in bed and I was like, man, like, not only am I a Christian, but I am the right kind of Christian. Like, I believe the right stuff. I'm in the right denomination. I'm in the right ministry. Like, even amongst the ministries here on campus, I'm in the one that is the most serious about this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm so thankful that I'm right about everything, essentially is what I was saying.
Yeah, those are my nightly affirmations too. I'm just so grateful for being right about everything. It's fascinating. There is an interesting paradox there, the so-called preface paradox, where people can think that they're right about everything whilst also thinking they're wrong about at least one thing. It's called the preface paradox because at the beginning of a book, authors will often say, if there are any mistakes in here, like, I'm sorry. But they've gone through meticulously and checked every single one. So
Right.
if I went through every single one of your beliefs individually and said, do you think this is true? Yes. Do you think this is true? Yes. Because I'm going through your beliefs. So definitionally, every one of them
Right.
will say yes. But if at the end I then say, but do you think at least one of those beliefs is actually false? If you're a bit humble in any respect, you go, yeah, of course, one of them's false.
Yeah.
So you've got this paradox of thinking they're all true, but at least one of them's false. It's got to do with like probabilistic
right.
certainty probably. But yeah, there's that feeling that you've got God on your side as well. And you sort of go to sleep slightly prideful, slightly content, slightly happy. Where does that certainty come from? Was it the result of Bible study and consideration of different groups and denominations? Was it more sociological, just sort of the way you were brought up? Were you cognizant of the factors which led you to be in the correct denomination and the correct student group?
Yeah. So not at the time. I think that what I would have said is that I had been taught the right stuff from my parents,
Mm-hmm.
and I had been in the right environment growing up. I think that ultimately there's a few factors that contributed to it. I think number one, certainty is a really important aspect of religious faith, and especially Christianity, and especially evangelical Christianity, because I think that agreeing with a set of propositional statements is actually what if you ask somebody to describe, they might say, well, it's about a relationship with Jesus. But if you're like, well, yeah, but what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
These propositional statements come up. It's like, well, I believe this about Jesus. If any church worth its salt has a "we believe" place on their website, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought, right? And so I think that being certain and being right about these things comes at a premium. It is really, really important. So I thought that being certain was very important. And then I just think I had the type of personality, came from the type of family where we kind of thought we had it figured out, right? Like this is a big problem for me now, is to not settle on what I think I figured out, to be really doubtful of my particular perception of the world, to say, well, I know that I'm wrong about some stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm not sure about, but I can struggle with wanting to latch on to certain ideas and be like, well, I've got this figured out, and you start trying to build this worldview. So I think it's a combination of the environment where certainty was really important, and then my personality, the way that I gravitated towards that.